Hello, everybody. Recently, I've been doing some studying on the mind-body prescription or connection, and using this information along with some things learned in applied kinesiology and my background in self-care and navigating that. And again, self-care to me was something that ended up as a conclusion. It's not where I started my kind of pursuit for my style of health or my way of delivering health to others. I started with more fitness, body oriented things and performance related. However, I've seen that self care is generally the greatest expression that we have to be able to deal with the whole health thing. Health essentially coming from the understanding of being whole, being completely oneself. And now I've come to an even greater conclusion that I'm super excited about and kind of lends to my mission that I've made for myself this year, which is to clarify the human environment of health and what that looks like. And now there's a few concepts that kind of come back into play from my beginning years of kind of taking on this challenge till now. Uh, and I'm not going to talk too much about them, they're in different videos. But the idea essentially is going to go from childhood to young adulthood to mature adult, and this process. And this process essentially continually integrating mental, physical, and emotional health along that till we hit a point where we feel whole. We're no longer kind of resisting life. We are enjoying it by experiencing it and not defending against it. Now, to illustrate this point, I'm going to try to explain it the best I can at this time. So, essentially, in childhood, we cannot take all the emotional burden that is being put on us. We don't really have a concept of emotional burden, but the idea is that we do have a lot of things happening as a child. This is where we're going to integrate the most amount of information subconsciously in a way to kind of frame ourselves for taking on life. So there's an interesting thing that happens, and in this case, we start to become more independent. I believe that when we start to kind of strike out and do our independence thing, we also take on a moral perspective of life. As interesting as that may seem, this moral perspective is kind of a unbreakable promise that we make to ourselves with all the childlike innocence and understanding that we have, and should change in time, but normally does not. So we make this promise. This promise is generally associated with something that the family kind of passes down to us. We inherit this way of taking on life. So this might be that my family thinks that being strong is the best way to take on life. And as a child, I integrate this mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so then when I meet a stressful situation, as I grow, I will respond with strength or whatever I define or my family has defined as strength or as important. So I say, well, I'm always going to be strong. Great, that seems very innocent, and it is. However, this now starts to shape the core of our personality. So now I'm doing all things in a way of keeping strength in mind. And the statement again is relegated to the subconscious. So it is there. After a time, we start to kind of place all the things that go against the statement that I am strong behind this statement. So if I think being strong is working really hard, then all things that are related to not working hard get hidden behind here. And this means that I cannot see the fact that the things that I do that are not working hard exist. So if I've defined strength as always going to work, and uh, let's say in the other side of things, working hard on my emotions, which also makes sense, doesn't exist because that's not in my definition. So when somebody says I'm not working hard enough, I just fight that statement because I know I go to work every day, and that's my basis for challenging life. So anyway, as we go into young adolescence, we start to really get into this subconscious way of thinking. So we start to assert what strength is. Now that we can do things ourselves and we have more power and more decision making ability, we start to express that way. Generally, we'll be taught to funnel this into a art, a science, a math, a something that we're good at already. Because we've chosen to take on life a certain way, there's categories that fit generally how we're feeling, and we fit into them. So we can hide behind this as well, and I think this is kind of the persona, essentially, that kind of builds up as well. Later on, we see it as that. So as we go through that, we start to further put things behind this original moral question or moral statement we've made to ourselves. And this, in turn, forms what I call the perfect prison. Meaning, to be able to confront this thing, we're going to have to go through all the weaknesses that are gained by our definition, in this case, of what strength is. Right? So we have to take this thing on eventually. And as we kind of use our strengths that we've learned in childhood are making us a better person, a good boy, a good girl, and we keep using those things, there'll be a point where it's not quite adding up. Well, if I am this perfect person or this good guy or trying my best, then why don't I have this feel that way or whatever? We start to have this, let's say, cognitive dissonance with our original statement and what it means in adult life. And generally, this should make us start to reflect on our internal aspect, like we once did when we were younger. We don't do that in adult life, though, so we continue resisting life. However, at a point, our body will start to show the challenges of this thing. So we might get easily irritated. We might have an angry disposition. We might shy away from conflict. We might go towards conflict. We might try to say that we never need anything. It would be wrong to say that that doesn't serve a purpose. However, in adult life, we need to address this. Why is it that that is my expression every time I take on a challenge or look at things? Why is it that I always see the positive? Why is it that I always see the negative? Why is it that I always step away from that or move towards that? These are the questions that we start to kind of see playing out because we start to see ourselves in our environment and our interactions with that environment. This again is like the subconscious, which is always trying to be expressed, and generally, for a point, we relegate our emotions to our subconscious and then don't pay attention to them, but they need to be expressed, and it'll always seek expression. I think this is kind of linked to our dream analysis style way of looking at things, and also our collective unconscious and these kind of ways of looking at health. Now, that being said, we have these resistors. Now, the body, as a general rule, based on self-care, the body will always try to show us the truth. In fact, our mind's way of speaking to us is generally through the body because it does not have words. Ultimately, emotions can seemingly pop up out of nowhere in situations, and they tend to be overreactions or over doing something. And again, this is trying to be expressed. Why does an emotion need to be expressed in such high volume? Is it because it's being heard all the time, or is it being neglected? And if we go back to our childhood way of thinking of things, if a child's neglected, what do they first do? They act up, or act out, I should say. And if they still are not being seen for, what their needs are, and can't know what their needs are themselves, then they go into denial. Okay, well, I don't need anything. I'm not that important, or people are too busy, and we make these other secondary statements. And you could say those are ways of taking on life, essentially, and lots of people do them. However, that is not the end goal of that. And the way kind of life works, or how we've classified life, is there's always a duality. To be strong, there must be weakness. And in going to our pinnacle of being strong, we will find out our weakness. And as we find out our weakness, our strength is really being challenged. And we must redefine things if we're going to make it through that process. I call this kind of escaping the perfect prison. And once we do so, we take on that moral statement that we made in innocence. Then we're able to release a lot of pressure. Our body stops the aches and pains that seem to come out of nowhere. The tiredness, the fatigueness, the not having enough energy, the emotional reactions, the outbursts, the outcries, the travesties, our meanness to other humans and other people and other things in the planet, all come from this relegated subconscious thing. But once we take that on, we start to see that one is the other, and all things are needed to kind of flow with life. This is like Zen style, Wu-Wei, kind of going with the flow and seeing it for what it is, not necessarily fighting it, but observing it. Mindfulness, wellness, all these kind of concepts really come out to play in this perspective. Now, that all being said, is it really easy to do that? Not really, because again, it is in the subconscious. We're not aware of it in the first place. Now, there can be certain circumstances that bring out this thing. Generally, we'll have a what they will call a shadow projection, where we instantly dislike somebody, or we find it easy to be angry, upset, or annoyed with this one person. Generally, this is going to be somebody who's close to you, or in a way symbolizes that thing that we have been repressing. So this is often easy seen by people attacking the strongest person in the room, or being always overburdened by being the nice person. Everybody offloads on you because you're the nice person. Why is that? Is it really you, or is it more of an archetypical structure of the kind of caregiver, the nurturer? I'm going to say it's more that. So the lesson for the caring person is to find their voice and talk about what they find important, and their voice needs to be heard. So there's that duality again. Either way, moving on from that concept, I think we move towards the understanding that these are all ways of the emotions trying to express themselves. And as far as we've kind of integrated our emotions, and again, when I say that, I'm not saying just having the feeling. I mean taking the wisdom that the feeling has behind it in a way of seeing things more clearly, in a way of seeing ourselves more clearly, in a way of expressing ourselves more clearly, and in that way creating a kind of internal oasis, if you want, or Garden of Eden, that we're able to draw on when life pulls us in one way or the other. In this way, you could generally see it in a more integrated person because they react less to things. They put it in its appropriate category. So if somebody comes to me at work and yells at me, I'm going to say I wasn't having a bad day. Therefore, the anger that they shot at me has nothing to do with me. They are having a bad day. Instead of returning their anger with anger, so fire for fire, creating a more bigger fire, I simply can say, well, I see you're having a bad day. I hope it goes better. And this way you cut through the defenses, actually, and you speak directly to that emotion. And the person might get even more angry, but at some point it did resonate on a deeper level, and that's their journey. Everybody's fighting a hard battle anyway, so why would we make it harder? This is very hard stuff to come to the conclusion of, and in life, everything must equate to an experience. Therefore, when we live that experience, we're able to give further validation in a concrete way of moving forward with our own health. This I view as the main reason people are actually drawn to fitness as a solution to things. Fitness has a very concreteness about it. You are doing the action, you are conquering the thing, you are overcoming this thing, and I think it's very symbolic in the sense of overcoming the true challenge. And generally when people come to fitness and the success rate is not very high, that people stay there, especially if they've not already been kind of brought into that culture. If they're an athlete their whole life, it's easy for them to stay there, mainly because that is their kind of coping mechanism of choice, an overemphasis on physicality. However, because it's not the thing that actually gives fulfillment to the underlying emotion or the full expression to that emotion, but it might bring about a certain amount of internal confidence, which is why probably you were drawn to fitness in the first place, in its symbolism of being stronger within yourself. And you prove that by lifting more weight, for sure. For sure, that's possible. Your confidence might gain. With additional confidence, then we might switch back over to the emotion that we could not process before. In fact, also with the expression in a way of somebody extending a certain kind of caring towards you, we can also learn and get more adequate expression of an emotion. If somebody shows you the greatest kindness, it's easy to see, once you've received and experienced it, it's easy to see how that's beneficial to other people. It might take some time on that journey to get there, but ultimately that seems to be the end conclusion. The idea, in my sense, of seeing things from a self-care perspective is that full expression is what we're going for, because we want to experience life. If we only live once, one of the best things is to do is to experience the most of it as possible. And we've devised ourselves in many different ways of experiencing life and activities and external stimulations and all that kind of stuff, media, social stuff, information gathering. However, that is not the full extent of what we're here for or what we're here to do. We might find a passion or art that embodies the most of ourselves as possible. And the only way to do that, again, is to embody our weaknesses and take on the second challenge in life, which is integrate the first half and see things as they are. Generally, this is linked to the aging process, but it has very little to do with age, only that time generally reveals things to be more accurate to what they originally were. If you're hurt, it's hard to process all the information. If 10 years go by, it's easy to see how children play and how that really worked out, or maybe even the real seriousness of the challenge. Maybe we're diminishing how significant that is to us. And that is also an emotional expression. It's not necessarily only just the positive, it's not necessarily only the negative. It's just the restoration of what that means to us. If my character always denies my feeling sad, that's a problem. And that's going to limit my life expression or my expression in life. And the body doesn't want that to happen. And the body is the truth keeper. So it's going to keep putting things in there for you to get it. And generally, this is going to look like slowing down, because the only way to process these things is to slow down, reflect, and have that time to yourself. And with the rising amount of mental pressure and stress, we limit that. If we're always trying to survive, then we cannot truly live. And that is another yin and yang thing, I guess, if you want to put it somewhere. And ultimately, in trying to push ourselves to this fully experience on ourselves, we have the same thing in marriage and partnerships and friendships. Anything that is truly important to you, you're going to try to put your best foot forward. Whether you're able to integrate all those things that are challenging for you or not, depends on time generally. But if you're putting in the effort and looking for that kind of solution, then you're able to do so. You will gain the most clarity once you have taken on that moral statement that you made in childhood, and you will be able to relax with life and take things less seriously, because now you can put them in the appropriate category. You can say that I'm not only an athlete, I'm also these 12 things. I'm not only those 12 things, but I enjoy those things. And in that way, you are more open to life and you allow it to come in. Half the time we block out, let's say, our feelings of being accepted, loved, wanted, or appreciated. And because we're only looking for a very specific kind of thing that means being validated in those ways, we will almost never get it that way. But when we open up our minds, emotions, and all those really softer, harder to see things, then we're able to let in a lot more versions of that exact same thing. And if you're into the understanding that we create our own realities, when we open up our reality and saying that in the act of opening a door is kindness, appreciation, understanding, without even knowing who you are. And this is, I think, why manners were created, in a way, to symbolically suggest the more, let's say, growing aspects and things in life. If I can show you kindness, then you can grow. And if you can show me kindness, then I can grow. I could take the hard things not as seriously and the serious things more lightly. And this was always kind of shown to us, I guess, from Caribbean culture anyway, and cultures like that, as the elder in the family, who kind of rules things in a quiet way, but has the end say, because the life experience that they have had give them appropriate perspective in the situation. And as well, they've learned to see their own shortcomings in life, because they've seen their children and their children's children, and even more than that, and they can appropriately put things in place. However, that dynamic has changed because the social family dynamic has changed, and there's a large amount of responsibility that's taken on by that elder, and they can bear it because they have the time to bear it. They're not dealing with the social pressures as much, so they have the time to really look at those things. Anyway, this is kind of I'm going to say, quick summing up of my whole career and experiences and studies to this point of creating the environment of health for humanity or health for people. And I'm going to continue doing the thing that I like to do and creating these videos, but I really wanted to use this as a clarifying video for all my previous videos. I did look back at them and see the things that I was saying, and it's good to be able to laugh at yourself. I've grown a lot over the time, and it was very reflective in me looking back at that. And in that way, I want to do honor to the things that I originally started out with, but also give them the value of the experience of what I have learned through dedication, work, persistence, and practice with my clients, with myself. I am a kind of person who likes to lead by example. So I've went through these things as much as I can talk about them, and hopefully you can see the wisdom, insight, and the power of the synergy of our way of dealing with health, and not the isolation of picking one style over another style. Really, it is about the life itself, the quality of that life, and the understanding of that person to themselves, to life, so they can experience. Have a great day.